So thank you and good afternoon. I hope you had a good lunch, and I hope you are not sleepy because taking by what we discussed in the first session, I think it was very interested. We have lots of follow-up questions about the challenges on transboundary movement, and hopefully this session will also be as informational as it was. So I invite you all to be active and please squeeze our panelists here because they are experts in the area and can collaborate a lot with the discussions. So the purpose of this breakout session is to talk about dealing with end-of-life equipment, right? We always talk about, we have been talking about life cycle of refrigerants for a number of years. We might say that we already know lots of the problems, challenges, and opportunities, but we sometimes forgot that these refrigerants are inside equipment. So the minute you recover the refrigerant, you also need to have strategies and structures in place to also recover and proper dispose this equipment. And this equipment go a little bit beyond the Montreal Protocol because they have critical minerals, they might have chemicals controlled by the Stockholm Convention, they are subject to requirements of the Basel Convention. So it's another type of coordination that we require on top of the discussions of energy efficiency that we say we need to coordinate with energy offices, with ministries of power and etc. Now we need to also coordinate with other international agreements and also by default with other people and other ministries inside our countries. So to set the scene, we have here with us Francesca Seni. She's the Senior Program Management Officer for the Science and Technical Assistance branch of the triple conventions, Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm. And she will discuss a little bit the issue under the Basel and the guidelines that are being proposed to handle this equipment. So, Francesca, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It is a pleasure to give this presentation on the guidance and to be here with you. We are here to speak about the Basel Convention, but also to learn from your experience and see how the Montreal Protocol and the Basel Convention can be applied in a meaningful way together and be reflected in this guidance. So the guidance on ESM used and waste refrigerators, cooling and heating equipment is developed by the Partnership for Action on Challenges Relating to E-Waste, established by the Basel Convention. But what is this partnership? What are partnerships? So this partnership was established in 2022 by a decision of the Basel parties, decision 1522. And it receives the heritage of previous partnerships under the Basel Convention, in particular MPPI, the Mobile Phone Partnership Initiative, and PACE, the Partnership for Action on Computing Equipment. These previous partnerships, which were closed at the time the parties started to think, do we need another partnership on e-waste or not? What is this partnership? What could be this partnership about? They took a couple of years to discuss the terms of reference, and they have decided to continue to work with a partnership platform, which is a platform where the private sector and all the stakeholders are invited to develop a common work program and to contribute to the goals of the partnership. So they decided to continue, and they adopted this new partnership, which inherited the focus of the previous two. So the focus is to strengthen the ESM of e-waste. We focus on 5 waste streams. So the waste streams from the MPPI, the mobile phones, from PACE, the computing equipment, and new waste streams, TV screens, audio video equipment, and refrigerators and cooling equipment. So the scope has been enlarged, and from this time, 2022, we started to work on these new e-waste streams, we call them. So TVs and cooling. And what is the scope of the partnership? Is it only on e-waste? Is it only on the waste part of the stream? No, it is also on used equipment. And the goal of the partnership is to work on ESM and to work also upstream on prevention, on minimization, and on efficiency. The goal of the partnership is also to transfer knowledge and technologies, to engage in dissemination activities, outreach, education, but very importantly, to scale up projects and idea with the investment of the private sector, and to develop guidance documents, like the guidance document that I am going to present to you on ESM of used and waste refrigerators, cooling and heating equipment. Who can be a member of the partnerships? This is decided in the terms of reference, and the partnership is open to parties, signatories to the Basel Convention, Basel and Stockholm regional centers, academia, international organizations, NGOs, municipalities, municipal companies, and all the experts that can contribute to the goals of the partnership. What is very important is that the partners work towards the work program of the partnership in their own institutions or implementing parts of the work program. And in particular, when they work on the guidance document, the partners, the private sector partners, have the same voting capacity as the governments. This is a very special setting, which is only possible under the partnership programs under the Basel Convention. Otherwise, the parties decide and write the documents, and the private sector is always an observer. In this setting, governments and private sector are at the same decision level making role or level, let's say. So which are the members? 21 Basel and Stockholm regional centers for training and technology transfer in all the UN regions. And we have here a colleague from the regional center for Basel and Stockholm Convention in Southeast Asia, based in Indonesia. We have 22 country representatives, which are from parties, 19 private sector representatives divided between OEMs, original manufacturer of electronics, and also recyclers associations. We have different representatives also from the educational sector, 2 governmental bodies or agencies, 8 international organizations, 3 NGOs, and observers, which are very important observers like the WHO, with which we have a very strong cooperation, especially on children's health. And then also the WE Forum, the ILO, and these are big associations. So in the end, the partnership reaches out to more than 1,000 entities, very active on batteries management, on refrigerators management, on e-waste management. So it's a very diverse and large group. And now I present a little bit the structure of the guidance on ESM and used waste refrigerators, cooling and heating equipment, which is one of the tasks of the partnership. As mentioned, the setting under the partnership is very special because here the driving forces are the co-chairs of working groups, project groups, which are tasked with some parts of the work program. And the co-chairs are always one from government and one from the private sector. And it's the same for this guidance. It was discussed in the previous meeting. The guidance is not a technical guideline, even though it focuses on ESM, But the technical guideline is at the higher level under the Basel Convention because it defines how ESM for a certain waste stream is implemented and is supposed to be translated into national legislation in the conditions of the country. This is just a guidance, it's just a help for the operators. And the audience is the government, but also the audience here are the operators in the collection, transport, recycling, repair, refurbishment, and final disposal of this equipment. So the guidance is open and is a tool that is developed to be useful for different audiences. It is divided in 3 parts. There is an introduction where there is a little bit of scene setting, the scope, the explanation of the scope. And this part 1 is quite important because it explains how the partnership got tasked with developing a guidance for used equipment and for waste equipment. Because as mentioned this morning, it's not very clear what is used or what is waste. In the countries, this is a concept that can be different. I was telling before that what is in some countries, what is used is non-waste. We say under the Basel Convention, the convention is on hazardous and other waste, but if something is not a waste, it's not under the convention. So the way the countries have to not apply the Basel Convention is to call something a non-waste. And sometimes used is a synonym of non-waste in some countries, but not in all the countries. And the partnership is asked to work on both used and waste equipment. So in reality, this introduction explains that this task is not entirely under the Basel Convention. Well, it is because it's about waste prevention, which is a provision of the Basel Convention, but maybe what is dealt with is not in the scope of the peak procedure of the convention. So it's a bit larger, the scope, than normally, because the use part may not be under the peak procedure for many countries. So this said, the first part doesn't speak about used or waste. It speaks about equipment. And then the status of this equipment, it depends on national legislation. And then the part 3 instead deals with waste. So it deals with different procedures to collect, to separate manually, or to recycle and finally dispose of the waste, of this waste stream. What is very important is found in the annexes, which is in Annex 2, the glossary of terms. It is very difficult between the countries to find common terms. What is recovery? What is waste prevention? What is recycling? And then this was a problem for a long time under the Basel Convention, but during 6-8 years, the parties came to an agreement on the terminology, and therefore this terminology agreed worldwide is very precious, and it is repeated here, and it is to be read very carefully. And this is now a global overview, and I will explain now what is included, but really just some paragraphs in each part. So part 1 is the introduction. Here we have a description of the hazardous substances in the equipment. And so there is a description of CFCs, HFCs, and HCFCs in refrigerators, cooling and heating equipment, but also a description of substances which are refrigerants, and also in this type of equipment which are not controlled by the Montreal Protocol and the Kigali Amendment. So it is a broad scope which looks at the equipment in general. There is a mentioning of multilateral environmental agreements, and of course the Montreal Protocol, the Kigali Amendment, the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. These are all mentioned. And then there is a section on sustainable financing of ESM, of used and waste equipment, the paragraph on prevention and minimization of the generation of this waste stream, and consideration on energy efficiency, GHG emissions avoidance, and carbon credit certification schemes. This session is to provide examples, certification schemes, and how to generate carbon credits from the recycling and the repair, the refurbishment of refrigerators, cooling and heating equipment, but also providing criteria on when that help operators to decide if it is good to repair or recycle the equipment, or if it is better to dispose of it, because when it's cost-benefit analysis through an analysis of different criteria that will help to arrive to this decision. Part 2 is, as mentioned, on the repair and refurbishment of used and waste equipment. So it is about deciding the recovery pathway. It is about replacing the gases and how to repair the circuits or to reclaim. And then it is also on remarketing the repaired equipment, which are the labeling requirements, the relabeling, because when the equipment is repaired, it needs to be redeclared. So there is a special suggested way for doing it, and also how it should be packaged, how it should be remarketed with, for example, a guarantee for a number of years, so that there is a kind of security in the people who buy a refurbished equipment, that the equipment will work, is not going to die immediately after. And part 3 is on the ESM of waste, of the waste stream. So it has general treatment requirements. This is just a general overview. It's really more detailed, and this is just some key elements of the part 3. Of course, here we have a part on the removal of the refrigerants and the blowing agents containing CFCs, HFCs, hydrocarbons, so controlled substances and not, and the preparation of equipment for future treatment, manual removal of materials until the mechanical treatment, and then a section on the resulting materials and what can be done with these materials. Because of course, if the materials are prepared well, they can become an important source of revenue for the recycling facility. The part 2 and the part 3 have a section on health and safety, on the personal protective equipment, and also this part 3 on the informal sector, because in developing countries, the informal sector plays a very important role in the collection and also in the initial dismantling, but also a very dangerous role when the circuits are opened and then the refrigerants, which may contain controlled substances, are just released. So what is called leaks, and therefore it's very important to include considerations of the informal sector and the role it's having when a country or an operator is looking into ESM of this waste stream. And here we have some resulting materials, for example, ferrous metals, non-ferrous metals, polyurethane foams, plastics, and the residual fraction, what cannot be remarketed or resold. I provide here an overview of the recycling products and how this can be reused or sold or recirculated in the market. For example, the copper as a very good value. So granulated copper from cable stripping and shredding of the copper parts is it can be resold. Then inside a fridge or a compressor, the copper is segregated either manually or mechanically and separated from the ferrous casing, and then it can be smelted or it can be utilized directly into new products. The shredded ferrous metals from the casing of the refrigerators can be reutilized or sold for other uses. The plastics removed from fridges can be reused, but it's very important to make sure that there is a low pop content, so that the content of POPs is below the limits, so that it is classified as non-hazardous, the low pop content and the waste. I underline this because it's very, very important to distinguish plastics which contain persistent organic pollutants regulated by the Stockholm Convention and those which do not contain these POPs. Why? Because products containing POPs cannot be recycled, because otherwise there is a spreading of POPs instead of destroying them, which is what the Stockholm Convention requires. Now we have an exemption where countries need to register to be able to recycle plastics with POPs, in particular BDEs, some BDEs which are listed under the Stockholm Convention. And these POPs are more and more, because the new POPs are found in plastics, in cables like UV328. I don't know if you are familiar with the POPs names, but the POPs in plastics are growing. The list is growing, and it will grow also in the future, because we see that the listing of new POPs is involving plastics as fraction where they are found. So POPs is a no-go. If you find POPs in the plastics, there is no recycling. If you find POPs, the content needs to be very, very low, below the limits accepted by the majority of the countries. And then we have the PU foam from a fridge recycling. What to do with the PU foam? This can be used in different ways. Some facilities may choose to pelletize it or to form briquettes, or the PU foam can be recovered and used directly, reused directly, mixed with concrete, or used as a thermal energy substitute or sent for incineration. What is recommended by the guide is to degas the PU foams and to take care of them as a component of the equipment, which can include controlled substances. And then this is to invite you to join PACE 2 and to join the Ozone Secretariat, to join us directly, to comment on this guidance document, because it is still open. We had to, the parties had decided to adopt the guidance by 2025, next year, but it seems that there are new decisions being considered in 2025, which may affect the guidance, and therefore perhaps the parties will decide to adopt it in 2027, leaving enough time for all the stakeholders to comment on it, to contribute on it. If you would like to join the group, join the commenting group, or you're curious about it, just write to me and I can engage in a communication to ask if you just want to be an observer or if you want to be a member of the partnership to contribute to the document. And I wanted to thank you very much for this opportunity to interact with all of you and to present this initiative of the Basel Convention.
Thank you, Francesca. Just a word of clarification for the ones that don't work with the Stockholm Convention. That, as Francesca mentioned, the POPs, persistent organic pollutants, they are often used as flame retardants in plastics. So basically, you need to take care for the inner lining of domestic refrigerators and the whole casing of air conditioners, for example. It's important. In the past, they also some use in PU foam, but at least today, the POPs that are listed in the Stockholm Convention, they are not used in PU foam anymore. We don't know about the future ones that might enter, so it's a word of caution also, because this interlinkage between conventions and it comes to managing the waste. So we are going to move on with the discussions. I just want to place a little bit the discussion in our reality today. I think it is very relevant to the key IPs, right? Because at least from our standpoint as agency, when we work with countries to support the strategy setting, we mostly can divide the countries in two big groups. There is a group of developing countries that have a high penetration of cooling equipment. So when you talk about managing HFCs phase down, in the end, you're talking about managing the population of equipment. If you want to eliminate the demand, then basically you also need to eliminate this equipment and change for other equipment for hydrocarbons, natural refrigerants, etc. So basically, for them, the problem of managing e-waste is almost at the door, right? Because you see these strategies being rolled out, and the problem being created about quantities of old refrigerators and old air conditioners needing to be managed. In the other hand, there is a majority group of developing countries in which the penetration is still very low. For these countries, the problem is much more an economic problem. How I reconcile the Kigali Amendment with my own economic growth of the country, because I cannot stop growing, I cannot stop building new buildings, I cannot stop expanding my supply chain, my cold supply chain. So, but in the end, these countries will also soon in the future face the problem of e-waste because, technology advances and you need to replace the equipment over and over. Having said that, I will pass the word to Tiago. And we will start that with a history. I was in Brazil 15 years ago. I am also Brazilian. And at that time, the utilities in Brazil started to replace inefficient refrigerators that used CFC 12. So there was a big nation program. Suddenly, in 3 months, they were replacing 400, 600,000 refrigerators. And the country at that time didn't have a structure to manage. So the Ministry of Environment had to work hard to engage with the stakeholders to establish guidelines for proper dismantling. But even with that, with no infrastructure, doing everything manual, basically the refrigerators that we replaced in 3 months took almost 1 year to be properly dismantled in an environmental and safe way. And Tiago, he's president of the Environment Department of the Brazilian Association of Refrigeration and Air Conditioner, but he's also manager of one of these companies that do waste management, including recycling. And he might have some interesting news and developments to report, particularly when it comes to circular economy, how you finance this, right? How you establish a stable financing system to pay for these costs that are often not internalized. When we buy a new air conditioning or when we buy a new refrigerator, we are not buying the cost in the future of disposal. So, Tiago, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anderson. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for the Ozone Secretariat for the opportunity. So it's a good question, no? If you compare, looking at the whole life cycle of the equipment, the manufacturer can put costs in the final price of the product. The seller, the commerce, can do the same, input costs in the final price. But when you look at the waste chain or recycling chain, is driven by a value of each recovery residue or recovery material. We don't have this chance to input new costs. We need to extract all all the costs or compensate all the costs by the price of the material. It's a big difference in the business case, in the business plan. Well, why I am talking about this? Because in my point of view, we must find ways to compensate by the service, by the environmental service. We need to find ways to create value to the residue, to the material extract of this residue. It's a big challenge for us.
Thank you, Tiago. We also have with us here Pa Anton Purnomo. He's director of the Basel and Stockholm Regional Center for Southeast Asia, which also provide these services and technical assistance when it comes to how countries can handle these requirements of the Basel Convention. So when we talk about management of equipment, we are talking about circular economy, and circular economy means supply chain, right? When you dismantle a refrigerator, you want to make sure the copper finds the way back to the industry. But you know that some countries don't have this structure, don't have smelters, don't have processing plants, don't have manufacturers. So how you see this working out with the work of the regional center in your experience?
Thank you, Anderson, and also thank you for the Ozone Secretariat for letting me also in this group. Regarding with the capability of developing country, because we are surfing from the Southeast Asia region, so I'm just talking about this region. So you are correct that not all are in the region having capacity to handle actually this e-waste. So that's why in some countries they have a strong national regulation, which is really clearly mentioning that our country doesn't, for example, Indonesia, our country does not allow importation of hazardous waste or e-waste, something like that, which is in term of, for example, waste of refrigerator or other kind of electronic waste. But somehow it is still possible to import used electronic, and then sometimes that electronic is almost end of the life cycle already. So we receive a electronic goods, used electronic goods, and then suddenly after 2-3 months it's dead. So it become a problem in the national level, because particularly in developing country, we don't really ready on this kind of facility, how to treat it properly. So that's why particularly in the Southeast Asia country, mostly we are having the same almost similar situation. We are not really ready on the ESM of the electronic waste. So that's why I think it is also a good opportunity that in the COP PRS just last 2023 it is adopted that there will be a electronic waste amendment that it will enter into force in 2025 January, that every movement of used or electronic waste, it will be under PIC procedure, which is prior informed consent procedure. So it has to also undergo the Basel Competent Authority notification. If the country doesn't want this kind of electronic waste coming to the country, so definitely we will say no. Otherwise, it will be a problem when it already come and then we want to repatriate it back to the originating country, because to do the repatriation, it is very costly. So it is better just to inform in advance, either we want or not, something like that. So, of course, understand some. It is also actually helping developing country also somehow, because it also have a lot of valuable what you call it thing in that kind of use electronic waste. But somehow country or government should also put in mind that if they really want to receive it, okay. Otherwise, if it become a problem in the future, near future, maybe government should also take action on what you call it, protecting national level on incoming the use electronic from these developed countries. I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Panton. I think it's important also to mention that, because if a country doesn't have capacity to process and doesn't have the industry and the value supply chain to absorb, the problem of exporting, you're just also exporting the problem to other country, because although the country can recover some financial back from the copper particularly and ferrous materials, basically it can be offset by the cost of the disposing the plastics, for example, which are often not non-recyclable, at least with the level of technology we have today that is mechanical treatment. So it's important also to consider that. So we will open the floor for questions. I see already hands up. Please introduce yourself, and if you want to address to a specific panelist, please, you're welcome to do also. Thank you. Barry.
Thank you. My name is Hassan Mubarak from Bahrain. First, I would like to thank Francisca and her colleagues also to be with us here today. Really, this add value to us. And I think today you bring to our attention with thanks, very important issue, hot issue actually, will come in the future. We see it very clear. As you know, we are phasing out totally as AFAF countries within 2030 all HCFCs, and we expect a big obsolete of the equipment after 2023 till 2024. So huge of these equipment will be out of service. And if I'm talking about Bahrain and GCC countries in my region, I don't think we have a big issue with regard to the equipment themselves, because there is a good business for the scraps and these things for recycling and e-waste servicing. Our issues will be the refrigerants. Huge, we talk about millions of rack equipment, and huge quantities of refrigerants will come from there. And you know, not in GCC only, and I think in Middle East, and anyone here from my colleagues can correct me, we don't have incinerators. We don't have any facility to extract these refrigerants. And we know it's very cost. So what we're going to do, what was the future of these refrigerants? This is bring to our attention very crucial and big problem if we solve it or try to solve it from now. And even if we talk about carbon credit, as Francisca said in her presentation, with thanks, carbon credit today is valid. There is some value for carbon credit. I don't know after 10 or 15 or 20 years from now, somebody will buy carbon credit or be interested to have it. So really, we're stuck somewhere. I will say we are stuck somewhere, and I see it. There's at least in Horizon, there's no clear solution for that. But really, we appreciate your presenting this, and would like also to have a feedback from your side with regard to this issue. Thank you very much. By the way, if you allow me also, with regard to the used refrigerant, we talk about used refrigerant. I think today we have, as an example, very few quantities from CFCs like R12, which is make value for some, and also the halons. And we treat this refrigerant or ODSs as used refrigerant or used substances, and there's value for them in the market today. And we transfer them for the purpose of the recycling and reused again, especially the halons. So is this also the transferring for this refrigerant under the Basel or no? This is what we want to understand. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hassan. Any question here, please, sir?
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you for the presentation and for the sharing. My name is Mela William from Kenya, and the experience shared so far have already mentioned some of the issues that I wanted to address, but nonetheless, we talked about POPs and the transboundary movement, how that can be dealt with. And we talked about the capacity for industries to, or for some countries, especially developing countries, to address issues of even measuring those POPs that, you cannot even test the threshold, the limit. And when it comes to, again, recycling, there are very few countries who can do that in the region. And I just wanted you to mention maybe a bit of the ban amendment, whether that can also help countries to address this issue of transboundary, as we are waiting for the e-waste amendment in January next year to come into force. Then lastly, maybe from the industry perspective, how does extended producer responsibility, when you talk about circularity, how can it help in this in these issues? How does it come into play? Is it something that can be used to address the challenges being faced here, or it is still far-fetched when it comes to this? Thank you, and back to you.
Thank you. Bangladesh.
Thank you, Anderson, and thank you, panelists, for very enlightening presentations. Aligning with my brother Hassan has rightfully pointed out that already we will be having a huge number of obsolete equipments containing CFC 12, then HCFC, and at the same time we are also considering that those who have ratified the new POPs under Stockholm, so we have to also look at whether the POPs containing elements, equipments are in the country. So while we'll be developing KIP or HPMP stage 3 or 4, we have to consider both the issues. How we can deal with these important elements. We have to have a very proper, solid national inventory of banks, ODS banks. At the same time, we have to consider, since some of the countries have ratified new POPs, we have to consider that whether those equipments are containing new POPs or previous POPs. And my colleague from Ghana has already said that we have to consider the circularity, then ESM and EPR. So some of the countries have waste management rules, and they try to incorporate EPR, but on the ground it is not easy to make the EPR effective and functional. So we want to see some good practices or success stories who have these e-waste management rules, and they have successfully implemented the EPR principle in their policies. And at the same time, since Madam, your presentation said some plastics containing POPs, so we have to have the fair understanding which plastics that you are talking about. Since some of the countries are going for developing KIP, and later implementation of KIP is important. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions, so I'll hand over to maybe Francesca to start the responding, and Tiago and Panton if you want to complement anything. Thank you.
Starting from the problem of having a lot of refrigerants generated in the future because there is a phase-out date for these refrigerants, and if they can be moved under the Basel Convention as waste, or if they should be moved transboundary as used products and not as waste. So this is a complicated issue, because as mentioned when I mentioned that it was difficult for the parties to give to this partnership a mandate on used equipment, repair refurbishment, and repair refurbishment of waste equipment, because there is the status of used equipment is different in different regions. For example, in the EU, repair refurbishment can be carried out on used equipment and on waste equipment. It is used if it's not discarded in the EU. It is waste if someone has given it away. And in other regions, used equipment is waste, because regions would like to be sure that the equipment that is arriving to be repaired is equipment that can be repaired. So the control procedure allows for checks at the entry, so that the authority can see if it is a falsely declared shipment of used equipment or if it's actually waste. So to clarify this issue, they say everything is waste. And so then we decide when we do the controls if this is used equipment because it's working. And the same with the refrigerant. It is a refrigerant which has been extracted from a used equipment, or it has been extracted from waste. Even if you can reuse it, its status legally is different, because there is no owner. In the case it is extracted from a waste refrigerator, there is no owner for this gas. Maybe the owner is the company that is reclaiming it, but this is not very clear under national legislation. So many countries are being very, very careful. So they say, no, this is a product that is extracted from a waste. It continues to be a waste until it is reused. So if it is exported in country, from country A to country B, to be reinserted in a circuit, this stops to be a waste only in country B when it is into the circuit. Until then, it is followed by the peak process. In other countries, there are less strict requirements on products which are extracted from waste. So the situation changes at the national level. In the Latin American region, there are the used and waste, they are used interchangeably. So used equipment is often waste. Sometimes it's not, sometimes it is, but often it is waste. In countries where there is a very strict application of the Basel Convention, like we have seen in the case explained today in the panel, where the country had completely forbidden the export of refrigerants because they are hazardous substances, waste. So in these countries, there is a strong definition of used equipment, because then the word used, it is attached to what is non-waste. And in the Basel Convention, what is waste is under the Basel Convention, should be moved with the peak process. Whatever is extracted from hazardous waste and is hazardous continues to be followed in many countries as a hazardous part or of a waste. But when it is used, extracted from a used equipment, and it is non-waste, then the convention doesn't apply, the peak process does not apply. So the issue of waste, non-waste is the key issue. And how used falls in these two categories is where you have to understand, what you have to understand at the national level with the national competent authorities. Because the convention is on and off. It's on waste, but it's off on non-waste. So it depends on national legislation. and there are many differences. These differences are not only because a country can apply the Basel Convention in a different way, but it's really a provision of Article 4 of the Basel Convention. Each country has the right to prohibit or restrict the movement of hazardous and other waste by just communicating it to the Secretariat. And the Secretariat has a database of these more stringent regimes related to the movements of hazardous and other waste. The convention does not, in itself, that allows the transboundary movements, but then these restrictions at the national or at the regional level are declared and they have to be respected. And in this, I take this opportunity to answer part of the question on the Ban Amendment. The Ban Amendment is an amendment to the convention which sets an export ban from developed countries to developing countries. The Ban Amendment is in force since 2019 and applies only to the countries that have ratified it. But many developed countries ratified the Ban Amendment and they apply on themselves the imposition of not exporting hazardous and other waste to developing countries. And developing countries and other countries which are parties to the convention are obliged to respect this export ban. So therefore, the Ban Amendment becomes an export ban, but it is also a ban in import from those countries which have the export ban. And it is applied to hazardous waste. And therefore, there are different interpretations also here, but developed countries cannot export hazardous waste and waste substances controlled by the Montreal Protocol, the Kigali Amendment, to developing countries. Because they are supposed to have the capacity to deal with this waste themselves. They should not put the burden on developing countries of their own production of waste generation. So this just to answer the first part. And therefore, the answer is, are the refrigerants waste? It depends. It depends on the national legislation of the countries involved. And will the carbon credits last? This is difficult to tell for me, but maybe there will be something even stronger, I would say, in the future, considering the climate crisis. And therefore, I think any mechanism can be used, should be used at this stage to avoid the climate disasters which we are facing. And then POPs and TBM, the capacity of countries to measure thresholds, is a very difficult issue. In fact, on new POPs, there are very few thresholds agreed upon at the international level for waste. And this is because the developing countries feel that they don't have the capacity to measure these very low levels. Therefore, it's easier to say it contains POPs, it's POPs waste. It has to be considered hazardous and to be treated, not recycled, not exported as a product, and exported only as a waste for ESM purposes. So to be destroyed or irreversibly destroyed or treated in an ESM manner. And then, most importantly, the products containing POPs cannot be recycled unless a country has registered for an exemption which exists for BDs, for example, and may exist for future POPs. Because UV328 is in e-waste, PFOS and PFAS are in certain waste streams, and the new POPs are also found in waste streams. Just to cite some of them. not to say that open burning of e-waste generates dioxins and furans is a very big concern for this pop stream, which is very, very hazardous. And then the e-waste amendments and circularity and EPR, these are very big themes, also for the Montreal Protocol. Why? Because the e-waste amendments, which will become effective on 1st of January 2025, are bringing forward the definition of electrical and electronic waste, which is more clear and comprehensive. It includes WEEE, so waste electrical and electronic equipment. It includes components of WEEE, which is treated and or processed. So if you see the oil in a compressor as a component, this in the future may travel under the Basel PIC procedure. And the same may happen with refrigerants extracted from e-waste, so from refrigerators, cooling and heating equipment. Why? Because of the broad definition of electrical and electronic waste, which includes the WEEE, so the equipment, but also the components and the processed components. Processed WEEE, and all is controlled. So it is upon the parties to decide how they want to put in place the amendments, but they are very well. There is a case for saying that possibly in the future used refrigerants extracted from waste will have to travel with these new codes. We are speaking about new codes that are included under the Basel Convention. And the EPRs are effective schemes in many countries, but they are implemented in different ways in developing countries. Some are not so effective because they have they require an enforcement capacity. They require a private sector which accepts to pay. They require a broad acceptance of the definition of importers, because the importers under an EPR scheme are normally registered, and so only registered importers can import electrical and electronic equipment, and they are supposed to pay a fee to help to collect and recycle them. They have to be involved in take-back systems or establish organizations that take back the product. This is a big cultural change for industry in many countries. It's not easy, it takes time. And we have seen some other ways of putting in place EPRs in developing countries, which are interesting. For example, in Nigeria, the Producer Association is a mixed association, public-private. So the fee is managed by the companies and doesn't undergo this very complicated deployment procedures in the government, because sometimes the government has other priorities. And when the funds are collected for e-waste management, maybe they can be used for important emergencies like a famine or a disaster, and they cannot be used for e-waste management. So they have set up a system by which the fees are collected by industry, and then the industry is taking a very active role in the collection, the take-back, and the recycling of e-waste. This is an experience of Nigeria, which is very new. Is being monitored, is being funded, the development of this system by the GEF. There are also other examples. For example, in Ghana, the fees are collected at the ports of exit of the waste which is sent to Ghana. So if ports in other countries send the waste to Ghana, these ports in different exporting countries need to pay the fee. And there is a third party collecting this fee for the government, and the fee then is managed globally by the government. There are also other models by which taxes are imposed automatically when the product comes in. And there are several experiences, but somehow the level of awareness and willingness of the industry to pay is a key issue. And the EPR cannot be applied without buy-in of many, many stakeholders, even the municipalities or the informal sector. There is no EPR that can work without considering to include the informal sector in the scheme, because the informal sector is the collection system in the countries. And it's very, very effective. So it's somehow very, very useful and very, very dangerous if it just becomes a leaking agent, collection and destruction of the equipment with the leakage of the refrigerants, which are controlled, for example, by the Montreal Protocol or the Kigali Amendment. So the issue is complex, and it requires a lot of effort by many, many stakeholders to put in place an effective EPR. Effective EPRs are issues also in developed countries, which have a capacity to enforce the rules, which is higher than other countries, because there's not this buy-in by everyone, especially the municipalities, and we see, for example, in mobile phone collection, nobody wants to give up a mobile phone. There are the pictures. There's a social element in the attachment to the equipment, which is huge. So even countries that can invest a lot in collection, they collect 8% of the mobile phones. Is not very much. And so there are cultural and social elements in the collection, in the exercise of this kind of rules, and the EPR also, which are not to be underestimated.
Thank you. Thank you, Francesca. I think, Tiago, you have something to complement?
Yes, a little compliment. In this morning, we could see some highlights of the task force report. One of them is estimating that the effective of LRM practices during the use and end of use RECs equipments could reduce HFCs and HCFCs emissions by about 39 gigatons CO2 equivalents. So I agree, it's a lot CO2. It's almost just to complement the information, its result is about between 2025 and 2050. But it's almost the emission of all total global emission of 1 year. Is a huge contribution. But the question that I give is how fast we can do this, because we can do faster than the useful life of the equipments using HFC with a high GWP. So it's our challenge, do it fast.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we are nearing our time, so I would urge you, if you have any question, any issue, you can approach our panelists bilaterally to clarify an issue. I just two quick one word one conclusion that I take from this that is very relevant is that well, we now have an important funding window that is to support countries with the ODS, inventories of unwanted ODS. 2025 will be the last year that this funding is available. So if the countries did not request, you should request, because this funding is to support you to these strategies. When doing these inventories, this strategy setting, you should really consider analyzing the value supply chain of the end-of-life equipment, because then you can more or less assess your potential routes of export of equipment, understand what are the limitations, and then help your country to see how you can make this process circular. Already internalize all of these issues that we discussed about the potential, the IPIC in the future that this equipment will require, and the other challenges around the Basel Convention. And finally, about EPR, we could stay here and discuss 3 full days of EPR and probably reach very little, or maybe have great ideas that will need more 5 years to implement. But we, UNDP, last year, we did a workshop on EPR where we invited many South Asia and Southeast Asia countries. And by our surprise, the conclusion is that many countries are already implementing EPR. They already have EPR laws and EPR schemes, such as Vietnam, India, Cambodia is launching. But unfortunately, none of them in refrigeration and air conditioning equipment. They usually tend to start with easier materials, mobile tech, for example, laptops, phones, and etc., because it is smaller. In theory, the value chain is better positioned because you have valuable minerals, you have gold to recover. So basically, it in theory could be simpler. But this is something interesting also to look internally to your countries. If you already have these EPR schemes in place, that if they don't encompass cooling equipment, to see if how you can work around to make it happen, right? We will be happy to share the link. It was all recorded, so you can access this workshop through internet to see the discussions taken. So thank you very much. We're going to release you for the coffee break, and we see you again there in conference room in the plenary for the continuation of workshop. And have a good afternoon. Thank you. And thank you for the panelists for the time and insightful discussions. Thank you.